We saw our breath-forming shapes that weren't ours. It started as something small, the kind of detail you dismiss because the forest already feels wrong. The air was too cold for the season. That was the first thing we noticed when we stepped off the logging road and into the old growth. Autumn had barely begun down in the valley, but beneath the canopy the temperature dropped like we had crossed into another climate entirely. Frost crusted the fallen needles. Every step gave a brittle crunch, soft but distinct, like biting through thin ice. Sound behaved strangely there. It didn't travel the way it should. A snapped twig somewhere ahead echoed from behind us. The creak of branches above seemed to come from the ground. Even our own footsteps returned from the trees in delayed whispers. We were four, me, Aaron, Lena, and Miles, hiking a trail that had long ago stopped being maintained. The map showed it cutting through the oldest section of forest in the region, a place where the trees had been growing undisturbed for centuries. Their trunks were enormous, bark folded into deep black ridges, their crowns sealing out most of the sky. The silence beneath them felt heavy, not empty, pressed, as if something in the woods was listening with its whole body. We walked for an hour before Aaron noticed the breath. He stopped suddenly, raising a hand. "Wait," he said. Our exhalations drifted white in the cold air. That was normal. But Aaron pointed to the space between us, where his breath lingered longer than it should have. Instead of dispersing, the vapor folded inward. It tightened, twisting in slow curls that held their shape. Then it moved. Aaron's chest stilled. None of us were breathing out at that moment, but the cloud continued to grow, drawing from the cold like ink spreading through water. It curved into something that looked almost like a spiral, or a symbol. "What the hell?" Miles murmured. The shape unraveled the instant Aaron exhaled again. Fresh breath scattered it into ordinary fog. We laughed about it. The sound felt wrong the moment it left our mouths. Laughter seemed to sink into the ground rather than travel outward. It dulled quickly, swallowed by the trees. We kept walking. But after that we started noticing other things. When Lena breathed out, her vapor formed a narrow stream that forked into two thin branches, like antlers spreading outward before fading. When Miles exhaled, the cloud bulged and condensed into something that looked disturbingly like a human profile. A nose, a chin. Then it dissolved. We told ourselves it was coincidence, random shapes our brains wanted to recognize, until my breath answered back. We had stopped beside a shallow ravine filled with fallen branches glazed in frost. The air down there was colder still. I took a long breath, trying to steady the uneasy rhythm in my chest. When I exhaled, the fog drifted forward, paused. Then it lifted. The vapor rose higher than my mouth, stretching thin until it formed the unmistakable outline of a hand. 5 narrow fingers. The shape tilted slowly and waved. I hadn't moved. None of us had. The forest went silent in a way that felt deliberate. Even the faint creaking of branches stopped. Miles whispered, "Did you?" "I didn't," I said. My voice sounded muffled, as though the air itself resisted carrying it. We watched the fog unravel. The moment passed, but the feeling remained. The forest had noticed us. That was the only way I could describe it. The weight of the silence shifted, tightening around us like muscles tensing beneath skin. We began to hear breathing. At first it seemed like echoes of our own, but the timing was wrong. A slow inhalation followed my exhale, a soft release after Lena's breath. The sounds were faint and scattered, coming from just beyond the nearest trees. Something was matching us. Not perfectly, learning. The deeper we walked, the colder it became. Frost thickened along the forest floor until each step sounded like brittle glass snapping underfoot. Our breath grew heavier in the air, and the shapes grew clearer. Aaron exhaled once, and the fog gathered into 2 hollow circles side by side, like eyes staring outward. Lena's breath formed a line that curved into a smile that wasn't hers. Miles stopped breathing altogether for a moment. The forest answered anyway. From the darkness between trunks, pale clouds slipped forward, forming faces that hovered just above the ground. They weren't solid. They were suggestions, contours sculpted from cold, each one incomplete. Waiting. "Don't breathe," Miles said quietly. We tried, but the cold forced air back into our lungs. Our chests burned with the need to inhale. The moment we did, the shapes responded. Our breath drifted outward and was caught, not by wind, but by something invisible that shaped it the way fingers shape clay. The fog twisted into symbols we didn't recognize. Lines crossing, loops folding inward. The designs hung in the air longer each time, as if the forest were practicing. Aaron turned slowly in a circle. "Something's copying us." The word copying didn't feel right. It wasn't imitation. It was rehearsal. The breathing beyond the trees had grown louder. Dozens of slow inhalations surrounding us in a widening ring. None of them came from bodies we could see. The silence between those breaths felt alive. Listening. Waiting. Lena took a step backward. The forest reacted immediately. Branches shifted high above us with a dry wooden groan. Frost cascaded from limbs, whispering down through the darkness. Our heartbeats felt too loud. My breath came out in a trembling cloud. The fog thickened instantly, pulled together by unseen motion. This time the shape didn't drift. Turned toward me. The face that formed there was mine. Not a perfect likeness, just enough detail to be unmistakable. A hollow mask sculpted from breath. His mouth moved. Not when I moved. After. A moment delayed. The forest exhaled through it. Aaron backed away until his shoulders hit a tree. "Look," he said hoarsely. All around us the fog shapes were changing. The symbols unraveled. Faces emerged. 4 of them. Each one imperfect at first. Misplaced eyes, warped mouths. But with every breath we took, the shapes corrected themselves. Studying. Refining. Learning how we looked. Learning how we breathed. Miles whispered the thought none of us wanted to say. "They're trying to wear us." The cold deepened suddenly, so sharp it burned my throat when I inhaled. The breathing in the trees stopped. Every fog face turned toward us at once. Then they inhaled. Not air. I felt it like a pressure in my lungs, a gentle pull that drew the warmth from each exhale and fed it outward. The shapes grew denser, more human. The one wearing my face stepped closer without moving, just sliding forward through the air like fog pushed by an invisible tide. It raised a hand. The gesture mirrored the wave my breath had made earlier. Only now the motion was complete, intentional, and the forest waited for us to breathe again, because that was what it wanted. Not our bodies, not our voices, just the thing that made us ourselves. Each exhale gave them another piece, another detail, another breath to become us. Miles turned and ran first. The frost cracked sharply under his boots. The forest answered with a sudden chorus of inhalations. Fog surged across the ground, rushing after him in pale currents. Aaron followed. Lena grabbed my arm, pulling me down the trail. But I looked back once. Just once. Behind us, the fog shapes stood in the clearing. For figures now, almost solid. They breathed together slowly, practicing the rhythm we had left behind. And as they exhaled, the vapor from their mouths drifted upward into the cold forest air, forming shapes that were learning to be ours. The forest floor rippled like water when we stepped on it. The first step felt wrong. Not soft like moss or springy like peat, but loose, fluid, almost elastic. When Aaron's boot pressed into the ground, the soil didn't simply compress. It dipped and spread outward, a slow circular wave moving beneath the carpet of needles. For a moment it looked exactly like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. Except the water was earth. The ripple traveled several feet through the forest floor before settling again into stillness. We all stared at the spot where his boot had landed. "Did you see that?" Lena asked. Aaron lifted his foot carefully. The ground slowly rose back into place as if exhaling. No footprint remained, only the faintest tremor moving through the roots nearby. The forest around us seemed to notice the movement. Branches creaked somewhere overhead. The sound echoed oddly beneath the dense canopy, dull and stretched, like a noise heard through thick walls. It was colder here than it should have been. Autumn had barely begun in the valley, but beneath these trees the air carried the thin bite of early frost. The forest itself was ancient, the kind of place maps marked only as protected wilderness, where logging roads stopped miles away and trails faded into memory. The trunks around us were immense, towering columns of dark bark and moss, their roots braided through the soil like veins under skin. And now that skin was moving. Miles stepped forward next. Another ripple. The motion traveled beneath the surface in a widening circle, lifting small patches of leaf litter as it went. The ground flexed, then settled again. "Maybe it's just peat," he said. "Like a bog mat." But bogs gurgle. They sigh. They release trapped air. This ground made no sound. It simply shifted. We walked deeper. With every step, the forest floor reacted. Waves spread quietly beneath us, rolling through the soil in slow pulses that vanished just beyond the nearest trees. Soon the ripples began overlapping. For sets of footsteps created intersecting patterns beneath the earth, circular movements that spread outward and met one another like overlapping rings in dark water. And something about those patterns felt deliberate. The forest wasn't just reacting. It was listening. I became aware of a faint sensation underfoot. Not movement exactly, but pressure, as if the ground were subtly adjusting itself to our weight. Learning it, testing it. We paused beside a fallen cedar that had collapsed decades earlier, its trunk half swallowed by moss. When Lena shifted her stance, the soil beneath her feet dipped again. The ripple traveled farther this time. 10 feet, maybe more. And somewhere beyond the visible wave, something else moved. The roots of nearby trees shuddered softly. Not violently, just a faint tightening, like fingers curling underground. Aaron frowned. That shouldn't happen. None of us said anything, because we were all thinking the same thing. The ripples weren't fading naturally. They were being absorbed. Each wave reached outward and vanished not because the soil settled, but because something deeper caught the motion, like a body catching a breath. We continued walking, but slower now, carefully. Each step sent another quiet disturbance through the earth. Each disturbance seemed to travel farther than the last. Soon the ground felt less like dirt and more like stretched fabric. Taut, responsive. When Miles stumbled over a root, his foot landed hard. The resulting ripple surged outward in a large rolling swell that passed beneath several trees. For a brief moment their trunks shifted. Not visibly, just a faint lean, as though something beneath them adjusted its grip. Then they returned upright. The silence of the forest thickened. Wind no longer reached us beneath the canopy. Even birds seemed absent. The only sound was the quiet shifting beneath our feet. And something else. A low creaking. At first I thought it came from the trees swaying above us. But when I knelt and pressed a hand to the ground, the sound became clearer. It was coming from below, roots sliding against one another. Slow, measured, like joints moving after a long sleep. I stood quickly. "We should turn back." Aaron nodded immediately. No one argued. But the moment we began retracing our steps, the ground reacted differently. The ripples changed direction. Instead of spreading outward, the waves folded inward toward us. Our movements now created depressions that lingered longer than they should have. The forest floor sagged slightly under our combined weight. Miles noticed it first. "Why is it holding?" We stopped again. The earth beneath us did not fully recover this time. The surface remained faintly dipped where we stood, like a shallow basin in soft clay. Then the basin deepened. Just slightly. The ripple moved again, but this time it came from outside our steps. The wave rolled inward from the surrounding forest. Something beneath the soil had stepped. None of us moved. The second ripple followed the first. Then another, approaching. Each pulse lifted the ground by inches before letting it fall again. Roots groaned softly beneath the surface. "Run," Lena whispered. But when we tried, the ground betrayed us. Each hurried step produced larger waves that slowed our footing, the surface flexing like a trampoline of damp earth. Balance became difficult. The forest floor rolled under our boots in heavy swells. Behind us, new ripples formed, not from footsteps, from rising shapes beneath the soil. At first they looked like shallow bulges. Then the shapes sharpened. Long ridges pushed upward through the earth, tracing outlines just beneath the surface. Forms that resembled limbs stretching beneath a blanket, or bodies pressing upward from underground. The rippling spread rapidly now. The forest floor had become a vast, living membrane responding to our panic. Each of our heartbeats seemed to echo downward, triggering more movement below. Miles fell. When his hands struck the ground, the soil dipped deeply, a wide wave rolling outward like a splash without water. The surrounding earth answered. Bulges formed in a circle around him. They moved closer, slowly, pressing upward until the leaf litter stretched thin over their shapes. "Get up!" Aaron shouted. Miles scrambled back to his feet. But when he lifted his hands, the depressions his palms left behind did not disappear. They remained, two shallow impressions. Then the ground beneath them stirred. Something inside those shapes shifted. The impressions deepened, fingers forming where his fingers had pressed. Copies, not exact, just close enough to recognize. The forest had felt him, and it was remembering. We ran again. The rippling spread wildly in every direction, the ground heaving like waves across an unseen sea. Tree trunks leaned slightly as their roots adjusted beneath the moving soil. Behind us, new shapes rose from the earth. Humanoid ridges pushing upward beneath the forest floor, following the disturbances our steps created. Every motion we made echoed downward. Every footprint became a memory, and the forest was learning how we moved. By the time we reached the edge of the clearing where the trail should have reappeared, the ground had changed completely. It no longer rippled in small waves. It rolled in slow, synchronized swells, as if an enormous thing beneath the forest had begun breathing. We stopped. The ground settled. For one long moment, everything became still. Then the soil behind us rose, for human shapes pressed upward beneath the earth. Their outlines were crude but unmistakable: shoulders, heads, arms forming slowly beneath the skin of the forest floor. They were positioned exactly where we had stood minutes earlier, recreating us, learning the weight of our bodies, the tilt of our stance, the shape of our movement. And when those earthen figures finally stopped rising, the forest floor around them rippled once more. This time the waves came from inside the shapes themselves, as if they had taken their first breath. Aaron backed away slowly. "So it remembers," he whispered. No one answered, because the ground beneath our own feet had begun to soften again. And when I looked down, the soil beneath my boots was slowly forming the impression of someone standing there, even though I had already stepped away.